All right, well, let's get it started. I'm Samantha. I'm the operations manager for women in basketball at Basketball Australia. We have the amazing Jacqui Dover here with us. Hey, Jacqui.
Hey everyone.
Before we get started, we'll do an acknowledgement of country.
All right, that's me. So I begin today by acknowledging the various lands in which that we're all meeting here today. I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and extend my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples that join us here today.
Beautiful. All right, well, really excited to have you here today. One of the first female Indigenous referees in the NBA referee program, which is crazy. Can you, to get started, tell us about your journey?
Yeah, so for me, prior to refereeing, I'll just kind of tick off the basketball side of it. I'm a basketball kid. I've been around the hard court since I was born. My family was really heavily involved in Gold Coast basketball. So we grew up around at Carrara. I played basketball. I grew up playing. When I was about 12, 13, I started refereeing because we kind of spent every single day at basketball. So it was a really nice way to make some lolly money. I got lucky enough that my parents kind of trusted me to move out at 15 up to Townsville to be a part of the Flames and Fire program deal up there. And I stopped refereeing kind of at that point. So I ref like 2-3 years just for some cash stuff. And I stopped refereeing because I kind of became the player on the court that thought they knew everything because I refereed. So I would kind of yell at referees and whatnot. And I wasn't the best player, but I also thought that I knew all the rules. So I stepped away from refereeing for about 6-7 years until an injury and my limited amount of playing minutes I had in QBL or NBL 1 now at the time, and started refereeing. Again, just while I was doing my rehab, and it kind of took off from there. And so for me, I had a choice. Do I be a bench player in the state league programs, or do I take off on the refereeing journey? And I made some really good connections and friends and really enjoyed my first couple of tournaments, and that kind of roped me in, which then in the past, I think that's been 6-7 years now, that has kind of taken me on this crazy journey all the way to New York in the NBA program, which is nothing I think that I grew up thinking would be what it is. But it's been an incredible journey, and I'm really grateful for where I'm at right now. But that's kind of like a summarized version of my journey so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good journey. I love that you were that player. I feel like everyone here might have been that player.
Yeah.
I know I was a bit. How do you feel about being a trailblazer then and breaking barriers for female officials?
I think it's a role I've tried to embrace a lot more. Like I said, I started refereeing through injury. I dislocated my shoulder I think I had like 2 minutes that QBL game, and it might have been my first time on the court that season. But since then, I think, to be honest, being that player on the court has probably helped me as a referee. Like, I understand where players are coming from when they get those emotional reactions, and I think that's probably a big asset that has helped me in that first couple of years specifically, because like I said, I was a player that thought I knew all the rules, started refereeing, and I definitely did not know the rules. So that understanding of like the emotions of the game helped in terms of like, I guess for me, embracing the role of what I'm currently doing. Like, I'm really enjoying my journey and what I'm able to experience and do myself. And I have really high expectations on myself when I'm out on the floor, but to be able to set that standard and to, I guess, in a way, provide a pathway, not just for females, but like for officials in general, hopefully, that like we can make this a full-time job and we can go from there. It's something I'm really trying to embrace and trying to take under my wing to my work on the court then inspires other people. And I think we're in a really good position in basketball within Australia, is that that's now becoming a full-time opportunity for people. So if we have players or coaches or anyone involved in the sport that wants to switch to refereeing, that it can be a legitimate option now that we have that there. So I guess for me, like I'm trying to push myself to be the best referee and to like the things with the NBA and what I can try to do there and international with FIBA and stuff is if what I'm doing then encourages other people, like I'm ticking a box for myself in terms of how challenging I am towards myself and my goals, but then to inspire somebody else is really, I guess, like a cool aspect to it that I didn't really think was going to be part of it. But I'm trying to embrace it as much as I can and encourage and try to make refereeing like a cool space within basketball in Australia, because it's not anything I grew up going, oh yeah, I want to be a referee and go live in the United States for 12 months and be part of a program. That's not anything I ever thought was doable or something that I would be doing. So embracing it, I think, is a nice summary of it.
Yeah, I love that. And trying to make it cool. I certainly think that would be great. Do that. What is the most important quality you think an official needs?
For me, I guess it ties back to that, me being that bit of, I don't know how bad of a word this is, but a turd of a player that thought I knew everything. I think communication and understanding, like I understand where you're coming from, but this is the solution we need to go with, or this is a solution I have, or this is like the respect for the game side of it. So there's like the referee part of it, like the communication, knowing our boundaries, and they're really important in terms of warnings, technical fouls, all that type of stuff. But I think the communication and understanding of where people are coming from in a game, whether it's heightened emotions, whether it could be a 40-point blowout game and one player is being really, really like, I don't know, like argumentative against calls. Like, why is that player being like that? Like, where does that come from? How can I help them through the game? They might be, if it's state league, they might be up for a contract next year, or they're trying to push to the NBL or the WNBL or wherever that comes from. But that, like, that understanding, that communication is something I really try to embrace. I'll apply the rules where they're applicable and where I can. But even like, I think it was last night in my blitz game, I had a foul call, excessive hard contact. I kind of did a wonder, went over to my crew chief and was like, hey, I want to review that for an unsportsmanlike foul. We upgraded it in the end for excessive hard contact. And then I was talking to the coach at the time and he's like, but like, what else is he meant to do when he's in the air? I said, hey, look, like, I understand he can't really do anything else, but I have to protect the player that just went to the basket. And that's what we've done. It's excessive hard. I'm not saying he meant it. I'm not saying I agree with the rule or like the application and that type of stuff of it, but like, that's what it is type thing. And I think like that conversation, he was like, okay, yeah, I get that. Because I was like, look, if that's your player, I'm going to go review it too, because we want your player protected, right? And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fair. And then that kind of just like ceased the conversation. It was like, all right, cool, we're on the same page. Like, yep, it's part of the rules. Yep, he couldn't do anything else. He's up in the air and then he takes the guy out. That's what it is. And we just have to go with the rules and what they are. So I think that communication and that understanding is a key element for me. And I know that definitely is why I was able to continue progressing my career in those first couple of years prior to my rule knowledge.
Oh, that's fantastic. With your journey, like it's huge and where you've come from already. What challenges have you faced so far along the way?
I think like naturally being female is probably a thing. Like I think a lot of things I've been able to have opportunities to like prove that I'm at that level. There's been a lot of, I think politics is the wrong word. It's probably just talk. This is a basketball talk, is like, oh, hey, like she got that game because she's female or she's Indigenous or what that is type thing. And I've had a lot of feedback of that come to me. And I think mentally, at the start of my basketball refereeing, that was probably something that affected me more than it does now. I put a lot of time and effort into my sports mindset training. I work with a psychologist out of LA to try to really maximize what I can do on the court and off the court as well. And that's really benefited me. But that I would be lying if I said that type of stuff didn't affect me in some certain way. And that's probably, for me, that's probably the biggest challenge, is I understand that talk and those comments are going to be made, but how I let them affect me is probably how I overcome those challenges. So like I purposely don't ever look at a game on social media that has any or post that has anything to do with the game. I just referee, because I'm like, that's just never going to end well. Like, I'm just not going to look at that. I'll review my game, I'll do my self-assessment, I'll do all that stuff. But that challenge, I think, internally is something that I've tried to work through, and to make sure that if I'm out on the court, there's not a reason to not put me back on the court based off my performance and the things I can control in that situation.
Yeah. I think this kind of ties into another question I have here with how do you handle any potential bias or discrimination that may arise in your role?
I like to rely on my personality. Like when comments are kind of thrown around, or if anything like that comes up, I try to acknowledge it, because I think if we don't acknowledge comments like that, they kind of continue to happen. So I try to make, not in a way of like being argumentative or anything like that, but like I know sometimes I can say something and then people are like, oh, did you mean it this way? And then it makes me kind of check in and like self-regulate that way. So I try to acknowledge what was said in a way that if I find it offensive, that it's addressed. I'm just not going to let it bypass, because I think that's a really easy thing to do. And I used to do that a few years ago, and I'm trying to really push my boundaries within myself to feel uncomfortable in those situations to then be comfortable in the future. But in general, I think I really I try to work to make sure that what I do on the court or off the court represents a high level of accuracy on court. And I'm going to make mistakes, I'm aware of that, but I try to be really accurate on court, so then my work kind of speaks more than what my words or anything else I do would kind of talk for. So there's not really anything for challengers or anything to kind of like stand on. If I'm out there doing my best, then that's probably the best I can ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. What impact do you hope to have for an aspiring female referee?
I just want people to be involved in officiating. I think what I said at the start is like, I didn't grow up being like, oh, I want to be a referee, I want to be a full-time referee. That's not anything I thought was possible. We're in a position now in basketball, like within basketball in Australia, that is now a thing. Like we have 4 full-time referees, 3 part-time referees, and that's going to grow within the next 5 to 10 years. So I would love to see a really high percentage of females in those positions. But I want people to be aware that it's an opportunity to enjoy the game outside of playing or coaching or any aspect that you're currently involved in. And I think that's something that we don't, or we could improve on, in terms of, hey, this is an option. When you're finished doing what you're currently doing, this is also another opportunity to be involved in the game, score table, officiating on court, however that looks, but that technical official space. Like we were talking about it in the game last night, and clearly last night was my most recent game, but we were talking there, and there's a massive dunk that happened in the NBL, and Vaughan, who's been refereeing for, he started in the NBL the year I was born. That's how long he's been refereeing for. But he was like, this is why I like reffing, is that dunk, I had the best seat in the house. And I was like, yep, like that's the cool part. The WNBL, like we see these plays executed and we see these massive shots or these high level performances. And you can't buy a ticket on the floor. And that's really why I enjoy refereeing, is like those crunch time moments. If I'm on those games, like I really, really embrace them. So it'd be really cool to see a lot more females or officials in general in those spaces, and for people to know that that's an option, to then like continue to stay involved in the game that way.
I love that you said that. Got to make sure our content producer gets that they have the best seat in the house. That's a good quote.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have then for young girls who do aspire to be referees as a profession?
I think the best, it's a challenging job. It's probably one of the more challenging jobs within basketball, outside of like doing your draws and that stuff. I don't ever want to be somebody that's in charge of competitions. That seems like a headache. But it's a tough job. Yeah, that's you. We're a really easy target for fingers to be pointed at, and I think not acknowledging that would be, I guess, ignorant of us. But I think relying on the community that we have, like I'm all for, if anyone ever reaches out or wants to chat, talk about refereeing experiences they have, to talk through that. But I think working within one another to make it an enjoyable environment, going to tournaments is really fun. Like I've got people that I was at my first tournament with that I'm still in connection with now, like 7 years later, and we haven't really seen each other a whole lot, but like embracing the off-court stuff to make the on-court. And I think in general, as people in society, we can make that a lot more enjoyable for referees, but like the on-court stuff is challenging. I like to be challenged. I don't like to be abused, that side of it, but that's something we need to work on as a sport. But the on-court challenges are easier to go through and enjoy when the off-court is as friendly and inviting as it is. And I think we have a really good culture within Basketball Australia for our referees that's the fun part of refereeing, is the friends you make and the journey you get to go along.
Just for everyone here, if you do have questions and you don't want to raise your hand or anything, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll have them asked at the end of this session, because I have a couple of questions left. How do you, Jacqui, balance your professional career and personal life?
I was going through these questions with a couple of my mates around how do they think that I balance it? And they're like, oh, you don't really show up for things. In season, you're not really here. But I'm okay. I will be there for really important things, and things that I really want to be a part of. And where I juggle it, I can. But for me, I guess that excellence expectation I have for myself is I understand the commitment that I'm putting towards basketball, and I'm very competitive, whether it's a card game or a basketball game. Like, I want to be good at it, so I want to put in that effort. But the balance for me is, like, I was refereeing the Blitz, and now I'm at my best mate's 30th, and I'm making sure that I'm present and I can be there and be involved in that capacity, or touch in and be with my family or talk to them, and setting boundaries. Like, I don't need to be involved in anything that isn't relevant for my performance, and things in personal life, and that pressure that you might get from that is, I'm okay with the sacrifice if I understand why I'm doing that, whether it's for basketball or for personal life. And I think at the start of my basketball career, I don't think I was ever really present in anything in my personal life. I was really committed to the thing, and I maybe the approach might have been a bit different now looking at it, but it's finding that balance and what makes me happy. Being happy was being involved in basketball, going to tournaments and succeeding on the court, and now I can kind of balance it out a bit more. But it's a challenging one. You're going to upset people work-wise, and you're going to upset people personal life. I always take the approach of, I just want to be really honest about what's going on. These are the things I'm juggling, and I'll always talk it through, whether it's with my boss or with my family. This is what it is. So then I can kind of come to at the time what I think is the best outcome. And I think that's the best that we can do with whatever we're going through.
Yeah. Well, I have my last question here, and it's a big one, so no pressure. But what changes or improvements would you like to see in the representation of women and Indigenous women in sport in Australia?
I really like what the Matildas were able to achieve just through playing their game. Like, they had the entire country behind them. But I don't think it should take a World Cup for that to be the case. I'd really like to see people present at games, or just invested in the women's game. Like, if you look at AFLW, we've got the NRLW, we've got netball, we've got the WNBL, we've got the Matildas, like in soccer. We've got all these really elite athletes that haven't had the attention deserved to the level that they're playing. Like, I grew up playing at Gold Coast basketball with Gretel Tippett. Like, we were in the same division, we were the same age, we went through rep together. And seeing her succeed and being invested in her journey and what they're able to do within Netball Australia has probably been more so from my connection personally with her versus the coverage that's been provided at that level. And they're really successful within the netball area. And I think that kind of comes back to the investment within women's sport across all categories. Doesn't matter the sport. We have some amazing athletes. And I think that coverage and that exposure then elevates people to be invested and to go to, especially the sports that aren't naturally on television. Like I think the Matildas is probably the best example of what every sport within Australia in women's can be, and what we can achieve with crowd numbers, with coverage, with involvement, with sales, with athletes. Like they're out there and they're putting in more effort and time into their work ethic than I think people are aware of. And it would be really, really cool to see that across all sporting codes really elevated and equal with what the guys are out there doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of hard to match numbers with the guys when we don't get the same coverage.
Definitely. I agree with that.
I have a question here from Leah. Do you have any advice on building confidence in communication with players and coaches?
I think the best advice I can do is trial and error. Like, if you see, say you watch any sport and you see an umpire or a referee talking to somebody in one way, and there's some sports that give that audio, which is awesome. But if there's something you want to try and see if it's going to work for you, try it. There is going to be times it comes back at you and it's like a massive bonfire in your face, and you're like, okay, I acknowledge I'm probably never going to do that again. That worked very terribly. I don't think that would ever work on somebody ever again, but you gave it a go. I think then that way you can adapt communication styles and wording to your personality. I think your personality is really imperative as to how you can then connect with people and get through emotional states of the game. And that's really, for me, that's through those emotional states of the game where it benefits the game in terms of coaches, players, us. Then I don't think that I'm going to say it to that coach again because that backfired, or B, I'm not going to say it to anyone ever again because it came out a lot worse than I thought it was in my head. But the trial and error is the best way to go. Nah, that's not my style. Well, yeah, that is my style, and I can work with that and then build on that. So the trial and error is probably mine. Like, don't be afraid to try something new to see if it fits your personality and how you can communicate with people.
Yeah, I think it was from Donna Aranda, I think on our last one. She said, don't be afraid to fail forward. And I feel like that's a big one. It's all about trial and error. I'm loving all these questions that are coming to me, guys, just saying in the chat. You guys can't see it because it's direct messages, but I love it. Did at a state level, so QBL, that you think worked best in your favor?
Sorry, Don, I'm going to assume like QBL was like my playing part versus refereeing part. We'll go too far. We'll cover both. So from a playing point of view, I mean, I wasn't on the court a lot. I got a lot of splinters in my butt. I was a very good bench warmer, but acknowledging who I was playing with at the time, like I was really lucky to play with like Mia Murray and the girls going through the Towns of Fire at the time, but understanding like what they wanted in the game, what calls they would want or what they wouldn't. I think you naturally get that when you're just on the sideline, you see the reactions and that type of stuff. So then like from a refereeing point of view at state league is you might have a 40-point game and the points of emphasis say you have to call 2 hands on the waist. Like if you put 2 hands on, we've got to call a hand checking foul. But if the 2 hands on are coming from the team that's 40 points down and the team that got the 2 hands on then get a clear layup, I'm going to take the hit in the change room to say, okay, points of emphasis wise, I should have called that. But for the game, we didn't need the whistle because, again, like Mia Murray played through that. She got the layup, we got the 2 points, and we got some game flow going in the 4th quarter. I think that was probably my key takeout out of QBL from like playing and when I first started refereeing as to like and because I had recently been in training 3-4 times a week and on the sideline is what would I want called if I was on the court? Like, does that help our team? Does it not? And that's probably where that with the mix of then learning the rules kind of gelled together to then help me to get that correct balance of servicing the game within the rules, but then within what each game needs, because each game is different. So I think that was my key takeout out of that state league stuff.
Cool. I have two questions here from Jess. Thank you, Jess. We'll go with the first one. So, what advice do you have for girls in refereeing in regards to connecting with their fellow refs? Sometimes I find it hard to talk to other refs at timeouts and make conversation, which can sometimes be uncomfortable, and making larger calls later on in the game, not knowing if they'll be there to back me up or not. Great question, Jess.
That is a really good question. I think it's tough at times too. If it's a game that you're like working on a weekday and you haven't really had a whole lot to do with that referee, that can be really tough. If it's a tournament, the best advice that can be is the second that you know your appointments, go and find them prior to the game and try to have a chat with them. Like, do you drink coffee? Anyone that knows me knows I probably drink way too much coffee and I'm always up for coffee. So do you want to go grab a coffee? Do you want to just like have a chat about stuff? If it's a tournament or a season where you can have that opportunity to talk to them away from the basketball environment, that really pays off when you're in those crunch times, like where you want them to back you up, or to know that you have that trust that like we're backing each other up on the floor, that pays off. If it's those like week to week and you don't really have a lot of opportunities to build that rapport with anybody on the foot, I mean, I'm competitive. I'm also super sarcastic, and I'll always kind of pick on myself prior to other people. Is then I'll come in and be like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this? Or did you see what I did here? Or hey, that last call I had was probably the worst call of my career," or anything like that. That sounds probably more negative, but it's more around the joking aspect of like, this is my personality, and this is where I can be like, oh, if something happens off the court, like it doesn't need every time out in not like a crunch time moment is you talk about what you need to, and then you might have like seconds of like free time is, all right, how can I talk about something that kind of lightens the mood? Like, I can't believe they're making us ref in long pants and we could be in shorts. What do you think of that? Whatever it is, but to try to find those moments that kind of take away from that seriousness of it, then help them when you're in the crunch time of, or come in and be like, I love that call you just made. That was awesome. That was like spot on. Like you called a hands foul, he hit him here. I love that call. That looked awesome. You looked really strong in what you were doing. Like there's different approaches you can take to it based on who you're working with and the prior, I guess, rapport that you have with that person. That's like a whole thing. I'm sorry, but yeah, that kind of.
Well, it's clear that you have a lot of experience in refereeing. I can say that. Her second question from Jess, do you have any advice for younger/shorter referees officiating older men/boys games, especially if they're tall? Don't worry about their height, Jess. What do you worry about?
I'm going to put it out there that we need to put, we naturally have to put a lot more like into our presence for the I'm with you, Jess, the lack of height. I have the best photo of me and Nate Jarwai in a NBL game, and I think I'm going to blame the camera on this one, but Nate's definitely further away from the, closer to the camera, so then I look even more like distorted in height, but it looks terrible. I look really miniature. But I think our presence pays off in terms of if you have a tough call or a call that's potentially controversy or it's a big call or anything like that, like all you need to really do is add a bit more voice and volume to what you're doing, or even just like hold your fist up and just like stay in where you are. You got him on the arms, but that's a blocking foul. Just like add volume to it, add like sternness, I think, and not in an arrogant way, but in a matter-of-fact way, like that's what it was. This is what it is. And I think at times you need to be able to flick that switch to put on those pants of this is what it is, this is what it is. And then the other time is the other switch is, yeah, I'm super chill. You can come approach me, you can come have a question or what it is. But that's how you can kind of balance that presence and that I mean, the height thing, yes, I'm definitely challenged. I'm called shorty in my family, so that's probably part of it. But yeah, getting that balance right around when I need to flick that switch to be like, this is what it is 100%. And then the other chill kind of approach that you can have. And that kind of balance then weighs out across a season or whoever you're working with.
Lovely. Another question here. How do you review your performance?
it's a lot easier to do where I'm at right now in my career in terms of WNBL, NBL, and that. We get a lot of game tape. So like last night, got home from the game, I couldn't really go to sleep until I reviewed a couple of key plays in the game. I'll usually watch the entire game back, but I couldn't get the system to work for me last night. But it's easier now for me to review my own performance because you have footage on any game I kind of step out on the floor of. I know there's going to be tape for. And that's something that I think that would be awesome to have at any level of officiating, because I'm a visual person. If you can say, hey, that foul at 422, you called a blocking foul, did you have a defender there, or however that looked. When I first started reffing, someone could say that to me and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. We're just talking through things here right now. We don't have footage. Like, I'm a visual person. If I can see the play and I go, oh, this is what I saw, I get what you're saying. I could have had my eyes here and then picked that up earlier and then got that call more accurate and that type of stuff. So I'm aware that my self-analysis and my ability to review games is easier because of the level that I'm currently officiating. But I think in like the backlog of that is I'm probably more critical. Like we'll referee an NBL game and we'll get maybe 10 plays a game, 15 plays a game with 9 camera angles. So like I have to be accurate, because if I'm putting a whistle on something, I know there's 9 camera angles that are either going to confirm or deny what I just put a whistle on. So there's kind of like the different levels. I think if you can get footage when you first start officiating, you can review things that aren't even call related. You can review things of how you look when you present a call, how you can connect. If you put a whistle on a play that you're not confident in, how did my presentation look at that moment? Because no one else can tell me how I felt when I blew that whistle, but I can look at that play and go, oh yeah, I don't look confident, even though I was 100% correct or 100% confident when I put that whistle on. I still look doubtable, and that's why the coach challenged me on the play and that type of stuff. So that sort of thing is really beneficial when you first start refereeing, is if you can get footage to then connect how you felt on court to then what it looks like on tape, is how you can also improve and kind of level up your officiating that way.
Beautiful. Another question here. What is your best advice for overcoming abuse, especially being a female referee refereeing men?
At club and representative level or nationals, anything that you're going through, I think reporting it is probably the best. I think that we have this kind of stigma that we have to accept it. It's just part of what it is. It's not like, it doesn't matter if you're female, male, if you're an official and there's abuse occurring to you, the best thing that we can do is report it. Put it in a report form, go grab your supervisor at the time, email about it, anything like that that makes the actions accountable, then assists to then it might be better on your next game, or it might be better for another official. But until we start addressing the direct inappropriate behavior, I would like to think as a society we're going to get better, but we're not really. Until people are accountable for what they're doing, it's really hard to see that improvement. And that might sound a bit negative, but I think that's just kind of the sport that we're in. So for me, I'm a really, really big advocate in keeping people accountable to what they're doing. So when for example, like I ran Townsville basketball referees for a couple of years, and the second like a referee was getting any form of abuse from a spectator or anything, I'd go sit next to that spectator. And they would look at me like, what are you doing here? I was like, oh, I'm monitoring your behavior. And they're like, why? I'm just watching the game. I'm like, no, you walk through those doors and there's a code of conduct on the wall. And right now you're not abiding to the code of conduct. So if you're not going to abide by it, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And my referees are going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes as a referee, but that doesn't mean that you get to then abuse me in that way. That's just not part of what this is. So I'm a big accountability person. And I would hope we have the people in place to support people that aren't super comfortable to report it, and to encourage them to do so, because it is a really challenging thing is to report it. So just having those supports in place. But I'm an accountability person. I'd like to report like every single little thing. I'm all for reporting, because I think we all need to be accountable.
Yeah. We have one from Kylie here. What was a highly stressful moment in a game, and how did you manage your emotions and maintain your composure?
Highly stressful moment. I'm going to link it to anyone that watched the game over the week. It was Saturday or Sunday's game. I missed a very, very obvious illegal screen at just over the mid court. It was a very illegal screen. If you look at it on tape, I'm not sure how I missed it, but I did. And then if you look at the next two plays, there's a situation with the back court where I'm too focused mechanically that I miss an obvious back court call, and I'm really lucky I had a good center in place to come and grab that. For me right now, that's highly stressful, is moving on from a play where I know I've missed something, or I have a really strong gut feeling that I've missed something. And I might not have seen the entire play, but I'm like, oh, a whistle on that play would have been appropriate, even if I didn't see the entirety of it. For me, that's highly stressful at the moment. Overcoming it out of that game itself, and I've watched that play like 50 times since that, but learning from it and learning how I reacted mentally from that is my learning point out of that. It took me 3, 4, 5 plays to move on from that. We came into a timeout, we talked about it. We got into halftime, we talked about it. Moving on from it quicker is something I can definitely do better next time if I do miss a play like that. And I think the really obvious ones are really hard to move on from fast, because you know that you missed something obvious because the entire crowd knows that you missed it. When the entire crowd knows you missed it, you know you definitely missed something, and that's really tough to move on from. But I think that is the challenge, and I think I like to use a 24-second clock as like my reset. Or anytime I run to lead, I like to reset, tell myself who's on defense, this next play matters more than the last. So it doesn't matter that I missed the last one. This next play, I can't compound an error with another error. Like, I want to be accurate on my next play. So that's probably how I try to overcome it. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's really tough. That illegal screen, I then took 3 or 4 plays, whereas some other errors, it takes me like half a second and I've moved on from it. So that's all just the learning and the development of it. And also that plays on national TV. Everybody in the country that was watching it at that time knew I missed that play. So that's another addition to it. But yeah, learning that I'm going to mistake it on. So that reset button is really important to move on from there.
Cool. We have a question from Emmy here. Do you have any advice on pre-games and how to make sure the discussion is productive for the game and crew?
That's a good one, because sometimes you can have a really interactive pre-game. Sometimes other people might not say a whole lot. I really focus on what I work through is like controllables and uncontrollables. So for pre-games is what can I control in the preparing or being a part of the crew. The pre-game is I can control how I communicate, how I prepare. If I know things about the teams, can I scout them and that type of stuff? And that's all things I can bring to a pre-game. But it's acknowledging the uncontrollable part is like, if I'm in a pre-game with somebody who doesn't want to talk, I'm not going to allow myself to get worked up by that, because then that's going to then make me not be in a good state. So is I can control like how I try to interact with people and that type of stuff. And I think that's a key element to start off with, because I might go like, hey, Sam, let's chat about like the blue team. What do you got on them? And you're like, yeah, nothing. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, this is what I found out about them. I was talking to XYZ and this is what it is. And this is the thing. Or, hey, look, we don't know anything about these 2 teams, but what we can focus on right now is how we can cover the court to trust each other, look on our primary focuses, look at freedom of movement, shooter fouls, and talk through specific stuff. But the biggest thing I learned with pre-games is sometimes you're going to have people that might not participate at all. And I used to get really mad about that. Like, can you please participate? Like, I care a lot about what we're doing right now, and you don't seem to care at all. And that's going to work me up. And then I'd go out and I'd perform bad. He's like, okay, cool. That might be how you approach the game, but this is how I approach it. And if you're not going to, I'm just going to talk through a bunch of things that help me mentally get ready, and try to really focus on the controllable parts of it.
Beautiful. This is the last question we have in the group chat. So, do you have a mentor? And if so, what impact have they made?
Yes, I think lots of mentors is the correct answer. I've caught up with them a couple of times in the past few weeks with my mentors that were around when I first started refereeing, and I haven't had the chance to be as like close, like within proximity of them lately. But talking to them and talking about games and where I'm at is really cool at the moment to kind of work through and see where I can improve on things. But having like mentors for different things, like someone that's going to keep you super accountable. And I try to keep like all my mentors are people that I know will be honest with me is a really key thing for me. Is I'm someone that I'd just rather you be brutally honest and tell me what's up than to like sugarcoat everything. But I've had different mentors for different things. And I think that's really important because I've pulled different parts out of every mentor that have now made me the official I am. And some of my mentors haven't even been basketball related, like Alini out of the AFL. She's been someone I've pulled on, especially prior to my NBL debut, where there's a lot of media attention that I don't think I was really prepared for. Like I knew there would be a bit of it, but not as much as there was. And so I just reached out to her and was like, hey, how did you deal with this? Like you're the first female within the AFL to be out on the field. How did you deal with this type thing? And kind of pulling that way. But a lot of mentors makes you a better referee yourself, and to not limit to one or two people that are going to like tick your box of, hey, if I send you this play, you're going to tell me I'm right. Like, I'm going to send my play and I want someone to tell me I'm wrong and how I can improve it. And I'm going to learn more out of that. Or just talk through like where I'm at and where my head's at and that type of stuff. And sometimes a mentor might not even be sport related. Like you could just talk to somebody about, hey, this is what's going on. How would you deal with this? And they might be in a completely different profession because you can also pull from that as well.
Awesome. Well, that is all the questions we have. Jacqui, your advice has been fantastic. I'm not even an official. I'm more of a coach, and I feel like I've become a better person. I love it. If everyone else here has had a great time, this will be available next week on our YouTube channel and our website. And let your friends know to watch it and even see you in the little icons. Love it. Thank you, Jacqui. If anyone has any more questions, you can email it to me and I can send it through to Jacqui later on.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jacqui.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See ya. Reach out if you need to.